Hey Dave, how are you?
What's going on, my brother?
I'm good. Are you in Hawaii?
I am in Honolulu, and
Oh,
so thrilled you do this. A big thank you.
no problem.
First and foremost, a gigantic aloha and mahalo for doing this, Lee. We really appreciate it, my brother.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on board. And you're part of a series that we've been doing. It's called Off the Road. We started it last year when the touring entertainment got ground to a halt by the pandemic. And we've been catching up with folks around the world remotely. So we start each of these with just a few standard questions to kind of set it up before we get into your latest project, this tasty new Gather Round. Now, from reading about you putting this record together, I gather, no pun intended, that where you are now is not where you've been since the start of the pandemic. That's how we usually start these, as you've had quite an interesting journey, unlike anybody else during the crisis. But for today, where are you joining us from?
I'm calling you from Laguna Beach, California.
Nice. Okay. And that's where you live, yeah?
Yes, here and in New York some of the time, although this year I haven't been to New York enough.
Okay. And before your adventure began last year, please hold off on talking about that for a moment too, because that in and of itself is its own body of work. But explain how the pandemic first became news on your personal radar and the initial ways that it began to affect your life.
I would say I first became aware of it probably in early in the year, really, January or maybe February. I was in New York City, where I am part time, and really just started to see some masks being worn, and being an avid news watcher, hearing about what was going on in Wuhan, and I think in New York, um, people were getting wind of it really pretty early. Um, at that point, uh, right in February was probably the last time I've been on a stage. It's the longest gap of not performing probably since I'm 13 years old.
Wow.
Um, and flew back here to California and back into Laguna Beach at that point.
And that was late Feb.
Yeah.
And the last gig was where?
Ooh, my memory is so bad with that, but I think it may have been in Ohio.
Okay.
I've been doing a really wonderful schedule of performing arts centers and doing a concert that I put together that I'm really loving, where it's sort of I get to tell stories, and there's a screen with video and still images. So it's kind of a behind the scenes concert where it's a concert, but I can talk about my 40 years on the road, my life.
That's great. Those are cool when people can mix it up like that. And you've got stories to tell, plus an incredible catalog of solo and music from the Stray Cats. And so, one of the things that is unusual about this Off the Road segment is you did something that nobody else we've talked to has done. And we've been having a lot of just incredible musicians joining us, and everybody's been touched and done different things, and depends on their age and their situation. But yours is really unprecedented. So, most of this, he has this new record Lee's got. It's called Gather Round. Very tasty. If you're a fan of his previous work, you're a fan of anything rockabilly, and certainly if you're a fan of the Stray Cats, then you will instantly groove with this. And my understanding from doing some homework is that most of the music on this new record, Gather Round, was actually written during 2020, during this unusual journey you had. So tell us the story and please spare no details.
Well, I really realized something about myself with this pandemic year and being in lockdown. And it's that I've spent 40 years on the road, and traveling is really in my blood. So it was a really difficult time for myself and many people, I'm sure. So what I did is I got an Airstream trailer, RV, and my wife and I headed out across the country, and we covered um, 20 states, about 6,000 miles. We went out through the 40, the old Route 66, really across the country. We went straight over, kept going, and got to about Virginia, and took a left and went up to New York, where I spent a couple of weeks. Um, and then after that, headed back in a more northern route back to California. So I was on the road for uh, about 6 weeks, in total on that trip. And of course, I had a guitar with me. I didn't bring a bass because I had basses in New York waiting for me. But on that trip, I wrote most of the record, Gather Round, and it became a really introspective, kind of amazing thing. I mean, the pandemic is raging, the election is raging, and I'm back on the road doing everything that I'm used to, except doing a concert at the end of the day. And for me, it gave me some kind of sense of normalcy in a way. I
Right.
mean, granted, it was strange, but it was more normal for me than being locked in a house. Um, rolling down the highway and seeing the country is something that I'm just so used to doing, and it became, you know, it was an amazing journey and an amazing thing to see, and it was an as well as an outward journey, it was an inward journey because of writing this record. Uh, I found that this album, Gather Round, is sort of a scrapbook of my year.
Hmm.
The song Gather Round is right about the title track, really about hopping in the airstream and taking off. And it's a fun, energy song that sort of to me felt like, flipping the middle finger out the window. And I'm still going to take some joy out of some things, which I did. Um, the album, to me, is probably the most personal record I think I've ever done in a sense. And uh, personal in a way of that some of it was inspired by the things right around me. Um, Graceland Auctions is a track on this record, and that one I didn't write on the road. I wrote some of the music, but not the lyrics. But I got back to California, got in my office music room, and sitting on my desk always is the book, the Graceland Auction book. I've been
Hmm.
getting it for years. I'm an Elvis fanatic. Elvis to me was like Batman or Superman or a superhero, like when I was a kid. And then I realized about the music, but the whole thing. So I'm an Elvis file and collect his things. So when I got back off of this long road trip, I sat down with the guitar and I looked at my desk and there's the Graceland auction books and it just hit me. I go, there's a song there.
Right, right. No, that's a great video too. That goes along with that, which I'll bring up in just a moment. But I wanted to back up for a second. So, what's the time frame of the 6 weeks, if you can, that you were out doing this?
Um, it was about August into mid-September.
Okay, so you stayed put for the initial frightening period of this before actually going and buying the Airstream during the pandemic, if I have it right, and then
Yeah,
beginning.
well, I had to buy it, and it took a little while to get it and get up to speed on it. But I think in my subconscious, I was planning this thing from day one almost. I really jumped pretty quickly as a way to get out from under, uh, and it worked. And I love doing it. I've lived on a tour bus on and off for decades, so this is very at home to me.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I mean, as you told it, it made a lot of sense because when you were doing that comparison, I think being trapped in your house for anybody has been difficult for a lot of folks. But certainly, when your lifestyle is used to traveling the way that you did, then it would be even more of an impact. And so, when you begin this thing, you guys leave from California, you head east, and what were some of the when you reflect back on it? What were some of the first moments of that maybe were either scary moments or some sketchy locations, encounters, anything that you said, "Wow, this is really intense to see the world during this time."
Well, you know, uh, some places driving across the South to me were got a little hairy with Confederate flags flying like I really haven't seen a lot of. I mean, obviously, you see that, but at that moment in time, um, through Tennessee and Arkansas, not everywhere, but big swaths of the country with a lot of Confederate kind of
Imagery.
symbolism, imagery. Um, one of the other things that was frightening was just simply like weather. We were in an insane deluge of a rainstorm night in Missouri in the Mark Twain National Forest. And I stayed kind of off the grid a lot of times and did things like that. At other times, it was more commercial, but I liked getting out and being off the grid and just really having no one or very few people around us, just my wife and I. Um, and it was amazing. I mean, another incredible stop for me was we stopped on West Memphis, just on the western side of the Mississippi River for a day or two and recouped and sat there with my guitar and just watched that river go.
Wow.
That's a part of the world I got a real affinity for. I've spent a lot of time in Memphis. Obviously, it was one of the birthplaces of rockabilly with Sun Studios.
Right.
I didn't go to Sun this time, but I was in the Memphis area, um, and I love seeing that river and those barges.
Oh, I bet. Do you have a catalog of all the states that you went to? It was 20 states, yeah?
It was 20, just a mental one, yeah.
So as you left, you went through kind of, as you recall, you left California. What was the first one?
Ar- Ar- uh, Arizona, New Mexico, got to Texas and went by the Cadillac Ranch, um,
Wow.
Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, if I'm getting that right. And then on the way back, I went more northern and went through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, uh, Kansas, Colorado. So I really saw an amazing, uh, this amazing country.
Yeah, no, it's a huge variety and it's the most unusual for sure. There's no story like this one. And I was watching that new video for Graceland Auctions, very catchy tune and it sort of explains all of what you said about your love for this stuff and the lyrics are just fantastic for that one too, by the way. And I'm assuming you've been there several different times.
Yeah.
That place must have been closed during all this. What was the story with that?
Yeah, I mean, uh, geez, most everything was closed, and I was on the road avoiding things more than looking for them.
Right.
To be frank, and like I was saying, it was a bit of an inward journey too. It enabled me to focus in a way. I mean, to be stimulated and seeing things and going places, but just my wife and I and this music and focus on writing and concentrating on that. And just to skip ahead a little bit too, after getting back, I got into the recording studio. I came back. I think 7 or 8 of these songs of these 10 were written on that trip. Um, um, 7 or 8 of these songs, the bulk of them were written on this road trip, on this journey for Gather Round. But when I got back to California, I knew I wanted to get in the recording studio, and that raised certain challenges as well. What I did is I booked a studio that I've worked at quite a bit here in Southern California. Worked with the engineer before, and really set it up where he would unlock the door. He'd be in the control room, and I would be in the studio. So there would be glass windows between us.
Right.
And I did most of this record completely myself. I played a lot of the instruments. My band is amazing. Buzz Campbell,
Yeah.
Matt Jordan, and Larry Mitchell. And they are all over this record as well. But I recorded it in a different way. There's the get everyone in one room, let it rip, and see what you got. And you can get a great result doing that. And I've done records that way. Or there's this way of doing the record where it was extremely focused and solitary. And those are both two different ways to do a record, but it's two different roads to hopefully the same end result, which is a record that is full of life and energy, and all pieces together in a great way. And so this record was sort of like working under a microscope. I'd be in a studio with glasses headphones and a mask most of the time, unless I was singing. Um, and due to the setup in the studio, I was on headphones the whole time. I mixed the record on headphones.
Wow.
There's not, and my musicians would send in their tracks. I would build the tracks. I'd put together instruments. I'd play guitars and basses and mandolins and harmonicas and
Right.
accordion, and have my drummer come in and do different drum parts for me. And I'd keep tailoring it. But there's not a note, word, or breath on this record that wasn't put there, that I'm not aware of, and wasn't put there for a reason. There are other rock and roll records that aren't done like that. But like I was saying, this is, you're shooting at the same target. You're just getting there a different way. And it was very solitary and inward looking, and it enabled me to be really laser focused. And I did enjoy that. I have to say, it was sort of isolating myself from everything else.
Oh, no, no question. And also mixing it with cans versus a whole bunch of different reference. Because I've mixed a few things myself in my day, and you just sitting there with the headphones can. What kind of cans do you use? What kind of headphones do you have?
There was a couple of different sets in the studio, so I would switch back and forth, and my engineer would also be able to Bluetooth it out to my car.
Oh, okay.
So
So you could use the speakers there. There you go. Okay.
that too. But the bulk was headphones, and I have to say, it was like being in a spacesuit for the most part.
Yeah.
But there was a focus that it added, and
Sure.
this bizarre, terrible year sort of forced a different way of doing things overall for me, from the writing process to the recording process. And for me, it's it is a bright spot of the year for me as an artist to have put together a record, and one that I'm really just so happy with.
It's such an unusual thing too, and a lot of folks have done the record part in a similar way to you, but certainly not the trip that preceded it, and not the having then used that trip to provide the material for the album. Have you ever done any other non-business road trips, more like a personal one like this, that took this long, or was this 6-week journey the longest thing you've ever done on your own kind of deal?
I think it's the longest that I've done. I mean, I've done rock and roll tours that have gone on and on and on, but that's different.
Yeah.
And there's always hopping on planes as well, and that stuff. This was literally crisscrossing the country on by ground. And I'd have to say, when all this is over, I would do it again. I dug it.
Did you stay in that vehicle? You never stayed in any kind of hotel or anything along the way?
No, I did not sleep anywhere but in the vehicle. Did not really even go in anywhere. I mean, all gas stations, of course, you just pull up and put on a mask and pump gas and get back in. So I think I've barely been indoors besides that studio.
And what about the food? How'd you do the food? You just pick up stuff places?
Brought a lot of stuff with us, and then on occasion would pick something up or drive through or something.
Any mechanical troubles with that thing, or other challenges that over 6 weeks, 6,000 miles, 20 states, crisscrossing the United States, I can't believe no trouble with that vehicle?
No, I got really, since then something's happened, but I got really lucky on that trip. Nothing went wrong. I'm not a mechanical person. At one point, some kind of strange light lit up on the dashboard, and I pulled over and started Googling things, and apparently there's something called diesel exhaust fluid that I had no idea of, and I did manage to refill that.
Look at you. Well, that's great that you didn't get into any trouble, because man, I'd be frightened about something like that on the on the road. And turn into a more serious aspect of the year, because you've and we'll hear about a few highlights of your incredible resume. So many people you've gotten to work with. But on that note of talented, well-known musicians, we lost a few to COVID-19. And through this series, we've heard some remarkable connections folks have had to some. And also, sometimes people don't know any of these guys. And that in either answer is fine. But I just want to name some folks, and you'll tell me if you had any connection to any of these guys. Maybe you've seen them live. Maybe you worked with them. Maybe you knew them. We lost Adam Schlesinger of Fountains of Wayne. We lost the great Manu Dibango, who wrote Soul Makossa and so many amazing songs. John Prine, Toots Hibbert of Toots and the Maytals. Ellis Marsalis, father of the talented Marsalis musicians. they're just among 500,000 plus Americans, but these are people who were noted musicians that a lot of people knew. Any connections to any of these artists?
I love John Prine, and um, I love his music. I did not know him. Um, uh, Wynton Marsalis, I've crossed paths with a couple of times over the years, and what an incredible family of American music talent. And we so those are the two on that list that I feel a connection with, but didn't get to work with directly.
And in your own personal life, there's been so much. It's difficult to talk about it sometimes. Have you lost anyone else to the virus?
Um, Not immediate closest circle people, but certainly know of people who passed away during this time, neighbors and the like.
Have you seen your bandmates? It was incredible the recording process that you did to maintain your safety, and again, similar to the ones we've heard from a handful of other cats who have also embarked on. Sounds a lot like actually Nancy Wilson of Heart's journey with her record. But have you seen your bandmates in person at all?
No, actually.
Wow.
Now that you mention it, have not. I mean, we're on the phone and texting, um, but I have not.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're hoping to get back into rehearsal once everyone is vaccinated, and I'm an optimist. It's just really how I'm made, and I'm feeling optimistic, and we are booking concerts starting in September. That the last quarter of this year is going to have live music in it again, and so we're proceeding with that. I've got some outdoor dates, some indoor dates in the U.S., and then some European concerts in October. So I'm really hoping we get to do that.
And are you like a lot of cats? And that's a great topic that's been throughout this whole thing is the impact on how tours are done and the future of this. Now, are these shows planned for full capacity, or have you been negotiating arrangements where you either take a lower guarantee and there's less people, or some kind of other deal to accommodate the virus?
It just depends on where it is.
Okay.
I've got a Moscow and a St. Petersburg, Russia, in October. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I'm in Helsinki, Finland, and even across the states. Talking to my other musicians and my agents and things. It's such a mixed bag. That question of like, what's the state of the music business? In my understanding is in Texas and in Florida, certainly that everything is concerts are going on in and performing arts centers in Florida have been proceeding almost throughout, which is kind of a head scratcher. But so it depends.
Right, on the venue and the state. I get you.
And the state, hopefully we're winding our way through to the finish here.
Man, let's hope. And have you talked to Brian Setzer, your Stray Cats pal, during any of this? Or how often do you guys communicate?
We, like a lot of people, we send each other dumb texts, with whatever on it. So yeah, here and there, everyone's just in a, I like to, it feels like waiting for the curtain to rise.
Totally.
And that's just where it is.
Your legacy goes so far beyond the Stray Cats, and when looking at your webpage and some of these names on there, for folks who are joining us again, this is an incredible conversation. Lee Rocker of the Stray Cats, his new record's Gather Round, and he's, as you've been hearing, done something just so unusual, taking a cross-country trip during the pandemic. When I look at all the cats you've hooked up with over your career, explain getting hooked up with the Rolling Stones, and share, when I mention that name and you think of your experiences, share the story or stories that make you feel the best, give you a big smile, and are just fun to reflect on.
Well, my relationship sort of with the Rolling Stones goes back to 1980. me, Brian, and Jim, the Stray Cats, we left New York. I was actually 17 years old, and we moved to London to see what would happen. And we hadn't really thought it through very well, so we wound up like sleeping in Hyde Park and just, luckily it was summer, and luckily we were really young. Uh, we literally bought four airline tickets, three for the band and one for my upright bass. And we managed to start getting some pub gigs and some different things, and word spread pretty quickly, and we started to develop a following and a crowd and a real buzz. And the Rolling Stones showed up for one of our very early gigs and sat in the front row, and then from that point things started to really get off the hook, and we landed a record deal. Um, we toured, did some dates on a Rolling Stones tour in the States with them. But I would say a story of mine with one of the Rolling Stones, with Keith Richards, that brings a smile to my face is about about in the mid '80s. I had a band called Phantom Rocker and Slick, and it was me and Slim Jim from the Stray Cats,
Yeah.
and Earl Slick, who was David Bowie's guitar player. He also played with John Lennon on Double Fantasy. He's got an amazing guitar player. We did two records together, and we invited Keith Richards to play on the first album called Phantom Rocker and Slick, playing a song. And he said he was going to show up, but we had no real idea if Keith Richards was going to show up. So we were at Electric Ladyland Studios in New York City, and we get a knock on the door, and it's the '80s and it's New York, so you don't open the door, you look out the peephole, and Keith was standing out in front of the studio with no jacket, a 5-string Telecaster Fender guitar with no case, just the guitar, and a alligator medicine bag. So we let him in, locked the door, and proceeded to consume most of what was in his medicine bag. We recorded all night, and then partway through, I'm also thinking like, geez, like, thank you, Keith, and this is amazing. Do you pay him? Like, how does this work? I really had no idea, but that kind of figured itself out. Was as he was leaving, he went to the coat rack and took my custom-made leopard jacket, put it on, and left the studio.
Paid, marked as paid.
Exactly. So, if anyone wants Keith Richards on their album, you might want to get a leopard coat.
Right. Bring a nice piece of clothing to the session.
Right.
You mentioned John Lennon, and not a whole lot of cats that I've spoken to have both George Harrison and Ringo Starr on their resume. Take us to these.
Yeah, I met both and worked with both Ringo and George. The first time and how I met them was through Carl Perkins. Carl wrote Blue Suede Shoes. He was the architect of rock and roll. One of them, if there was a Mount Rushmore of rock and roll, Carl Perkins would be on it. And he was put together a TV special, filmed in London but shown everywhere, and it had not all of the people, but the people that Carl invited, which was Dave Edmunds, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Roseanne Cash, myself, Earl Slick. And so we rehearsed for a week and recorded this fantastic concert that still stands to this day as just a really fantastic event. And then again, I got a call many years later, developed a friendship with George. And then years later, got a call from Ringo to play on one of his solo records. And that must have been 15, 20 years later, called Vertical Man was one of Ringo's albums. And did some sessions for him on that.
And when you first met either of those guys, was it one of those moments where your heart almost skips a beat and you're like, oh my Lord, look who has just walked in the room?
Yes, but so friendly and kind and just that it just felt natural. It was just other musicians in a way. I mean, sure, I was excited. One of the things that struck me was first meeting George. He said hi and shook hands and smiled, and we're in the control room, and we're looking out through the glass again. It's always the glass window in the control room, and Carl Perkins walks in, and he's standing next. George is standing next to me. He goes, "Oh my God, it's Carl Perkins." He knew Carl for forever, but the excitement that he had to see Carl Perkins,
Yeah,
um,
man.
that kind of, and it was just a fantastic experience.
No, it says a lot about that kind of cat that he was. Yeah, he's we just had Peter Frampton on a little ways back, and he had some, as you can know, he has some great George stories too. George just he has a great aura. George had a place on Maui. Did you ever go to visit him there or no?
No, but I saw a non musical hang with George in California a number of years ago, and he was telling me about the house in Hawaii, and that had come up because he was in California staying at a friend's house in LA, and was saying that he was afraid of the US and what had happened with with John, and security, and just he felt uneasy. And I think he was in LA for a few days before going to Hawaii, where he had mentioned he loved it, and always felt so comfortable there.
No question. And Willie Nelson, you've jammed with. He's our dear brother on Maui. Never spent time with him out here, did you?
No, but I've done a lot of Willie events, Fourth of July concerts, and played with him at the Atlanta Speedway. One of the I'll never forget being in Texas at a Fourth of July picnic, he called it, and I'm going up with my band, and we start playing, and it sounds good, and the crowd is there, and it's just, wow, this is something is going on. We're just really killing it, and so I'm singing to the microphone. The band's behind me. I'm playing bass, and I hear this other guitar, and Willie decided to put his guitar on and start just playing along with us. So thank you, Willie.
What a great memory.
Yeah, and it's like he just like started. We were doing some classic, probably "That's All Right, Mama" and "Blue Moon of Kentucky" and some early rockabilly stuff. And I heard this acoustic guitar, and it was just, man, that was cool.
Man, you've got so many stories and so much experience, and really, just what an amazing guest you are. You're just loaded down with stuff, and out of sheer respect for you, I won't just burn you down with storytelling, because it's really, you've got the kind of stories we could just plug you in and run for a while. One thing about you that's also kind of cool, one thing about this whole series, which I'm just so grateful for, so many of you cats, all of you really, are at your houses, and we've had so many people generously be willing to play some music, because as you know, except for a handful of local acts that are bravely doing shows for small audiences, there's no touring coming here, and there's no shows that people can go to, and so many people have played a little something impromptu, and it's nice because it gives you a little sense of live music, and it makes things really touching, and I understand you've got some instruments there that are handy, and maybe you'd play a song for our audience and make our Off the Road series just a little bit more special.
Sure thing. I'm going to do a song that I wrote that's on the new record. It's on Gather Round. We also recorded it with the Stray Cats for the album called 40. So I've got three different versions of it. And it's a song, I'll give you a little bit of it, not the whole song, but it's a song called "When Nothing's Going Right, Go Left."
You're an animal. And again, it's a really special moment. It's Lee Rocker of the Stray Cats, new records Gather Round, and he's doing a little exclusive performance for us here on All Things Considered in our Off the Road series. Take it away, Brother Lee.
Nothing's going right, and you just can't read the signs. Sometimes things go south, and you try and walk the line. You thought you had some money, and you find out you're in debt. You've been moving down a one-way road, headed for regret. When nothing's going right, when nothing's going right, when nothing's going right, go left, go left. Well, you found a diamond ring, and it fell into the drain. You just can't get it out, girl, and you won't see that again. You need a lucky penny, and you need a rabbit's foot to find a four-leaf clover, girl, you really gotta look. Nothing's going right, nothing's going right, nothing's going right. Go left, go left. Sat down at the table, check your hands and place your bet. You think you're feeling lucky, but you haven't won it yet. But nothing's going right, nothing's going right, nothing's going right. Go left, go left, go left, go left.
That is ferocious, giving you huge high fives, socially distanced, of course. Thank you so much, my brother.
All right.
We appreciate it. That's super, super cool, and just very, very generous of you to do. I certainly hope that, again, it's Lee Rocker, Stray Cats' new record is Gather Round, and taking time to play us a little bit of music and also tell us some just incredible stories. A cat who went across the country and back during the height of the pandemic through August and September, and has now got this great record as a kind of a piece of the trip in a lot of ways, huh?
Absolutely. This is, probably the most personal record I've ever done in so many ways. Gather Round is what I did in 2020 when I look back at it. Everything from, hitting the road to Graceland auctions, Last Offline Lovers. It's a song I wrote for my wife of 32 years.
Deborah.
I wrote a song called Dirty Martini, but that's how I would end most days. And and I didn't even realize it until I was done with the record, really, like what it meant.
What can you say? It's an unusual product in so many different ways, and something you'll probably be able to reflect on for a very, very long time. I hope that you had a good time doing this, and I hope that someday we can have you back on again. I really enjoyed having you as a guest, and I hope you have had a good time today, Brother Lee.
Totally. Thank you, Dave.
That's really nice that you would do this.
Aloha, everybody. It's Lee Rocker from the Stray Cats, and I'm back to support HPR's pledge drive. Don't even remotely contemplate not making a contribution. Hawaii Public Radio is a community asset. It was super cool to be on the show with my buddy, Dave Lawrence. So if you're a fan of the Off the Road series, please become a member and let's rock this town. Mahalo. Stay safe, everybody.
Dude, you're an animal. Was that cool? You sounded great. You're such a pro.
Thank you so much. That was fun.
Man, it was great. So again, I can't emphasize it enough. What a great story that you have. And I hope they're shipping you out to a lot of stations because it's a very, very compelling story, Lee. And the record is just tasty. When I was a little kid, I'm 50. In the beginning of the 80s, my parents, I don't have my mom anymore, but my mom and dad, they take me to the beach every summer. And that record, you guys had blown up so big. So when I hear your music, that classic music, it takes me back to being 10, 11, 12 years old. That stuff was like the soundtrack on the Jersey Shore in the summer on the radio. So it's just great to finally connect with you. I've been a fan for a long time, and you're doing great stuff. I love this new record. It makes you feel good when you put it on.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you supporting me and this record. It's a a weird time to try to get music out, but you can't do it in the same way, you know, and get people to hear about it. And thank you.
You're quite welcome. Stay safe, my brother, and stay in touch. Hopefully we'll get you back on someday in the future, but please do stay safe.
You got it. All right. Take care.
Aloha.
All right. Bye.